Every year for as long as I can remember, American students would flood into my small little Mexican city for a week of sex, drugs, and drinking. The first crowds would come in during the early part of March, and each week a new wave would pass through, as each school started their holiday. This was spring break, and just as quickly as they came, they also left, leaving a trail of beer cans and trash in their wake. This year I would have been old enough to be one of those kids, had I been able to afford to go to college, that is. Like most kids around here who can't pay for school, I was forced to make a different life decision: assist a local cartel or suffer the consequences. The consequences being a 70% protection tax to ensure our safety, a tax that left most people without money for food. I made the decision to make sure my family could eat. You see, not everyone who joins the cartel are bad people. Some of us just want to make ends meet. For the first year of my adult life, I sold drugs to college students and helped the cartel run drugs across the border with one of my childhood acquaintances, Horatio. Horatio, sadly, had the money to go to college, but wasn't the brightest kid in town. Naturally, he gravitated towards the cartel when he came of age. I hadn't talked to Horatio much since elementary school, so spending every day with him for a year was a bit of a shock. In that year, I learned much more about him than I ever wanted to know. It didn't take too long for him to reveal his religious beliefs while we were on one of our many long drives. He told me about how he had found spiritual protection in the occult, how witchcraft and animal sacrifice had granted him safety from the devil. It was only a few days later when he got the chance to introduce me to his spiritual leader, who also happened to be a close business associate of the cartel, a relationship that would change my life forever. His name was Angelo Gelino, but he demanded only to be called the Godfather or the High Priest. Gelino was raised in Miami by a Wiccan mother who was a feared occultist. She often threw the severed heads of goats and other animals on the doorsteps of people she had marked for death. From the first few minutes with Gelino, it was clear that the apple hadn't fallen far from the tree. We drove up to a small shack in what seemed like the middle of nowhere. We entered, and then stepped into a small candlelit room filled with occult items. Gelino emerged from a corner softly reciting foreign phrases before he began to talk to us directly. He told us about his new understanding of the dark arts. He spoke about how he could only protect the cartel from the evil spirits with a monetary contribution and a blood sacrifice. Just as he said that, all the cartel members began emptying their pockets at his feet. Moments later, they brought him a goat to slaughter. To complete the ritual, we were all forced to drink the blood communion. I was taken aback, to say the least. It wasn't long after that I met his super hot witch girlfriend, Alda. You wouldn't be able to tell that she was batshit crazy from her supermodel body, but once she started talking, it was obvious that she was insane. Over the next several months, Horatio and I would attend cult meetings, where we were often strung out on drugs, as we pledged our allegiance to the Godfather. Our job soon changed from daily drug runs to deprived activities as we gained his trust. The newest cartel method of making money was to kidnap American students and hold them for ransom. Since I was at the right age, it was my job alone to get the students drunk and lure them into a nearby forest where they would be taken. Sometimes it would take a day or two, but I was making amazing money, so it was well worth the trouble. I tricked them, one by one, for months on end. Spring break eventually rolled back, and the Godfather asked if I wanted to see more inner circle activities in addition to my current job. I agreed out of curiosity. Once again, I was working alongside Horatio, but this time Horatio was noticeably different, much quieter in casual conversation, and all around more reserved. The next night came, and I was on the job again, looking for a potential hostage that would take a few shots. I eventually stumbled into a group that was happy to drink free tequila. One of them, named Adam, was particularly friendly. After 2 days of drinking, Adam and his group said that they needed to head back across to their hotel around dusk so they could pack up and go home. I tried to convince them to stay, but they politely declined. As the mob of college students began to migrate across the beach, I yelled out to Adam, who had drunkenly gotten separated from his group. "Hey man, One more shot and I'll walk you back to your hotel myself. Promise." He enthusiastically agreed. As he stumbled slowly in my direction, I said, "I got another bottle of tequila in my car. Follow me." We walked to the woods where he was then gagged and bound. We threw him in the van and began driving. I had never been this far before. Usually I loaded them into the van and I went home. It was a bit unnerving to be the new guy again. I looked around the van and saw an unfamiliar face. It turned out to be Alda's younger brother, Gabriel, who was also on his first kidnapping run. I felt a bit more at ease knowing I was not the only novice. We finally arrived at the destination. It was the same shack where we took our first communion. I found it odd that this is where they would be taking hostages. As we entered, I noticed that the room had been changed. There now looked to be an altar, and above it there were chains. Something felt off. Gabriel and I looked at each other in a way that showed that we had no clue what was about to happen, but we were sure it was not good. They chained Adam up to the altar and removed his gag and blindfold. He immediately looked at me and screamed something along the lines of, "What the hell is this, man?" I stood, unapologetic, simply waiting to see how the business deal went from there, assuming that it would consist of a few phone calls and beers. What I witnessed over the next 5 hours was truly horrific. Gelino once again emerged from the darkness and ordered his people to strip Adam naked. They then proceeded to sodomize him with all manner of foreign objects. They stuck needles under his fingernails and began cutting fillets of flesh from his body. After several hours of torture, Adam was bent over the altar as he pleaded with me to help him. Then Gelino approached me and held a machete out in front of him. He then asked me to take on this part of the ritual. I was in no place to disagree, so I stood up and took the blade. Adam screamed, "Please God, please don't kill me, please!" His screaming was cut short and soon followed by a low blood-filled gurgle as the blade struck the back of his neck. The first strike didn't cut all the way through, so I spent the next few minutes stoically hacking away. I finally grabbed Adam's head by his blood-soaked blonde tufts and handed it to the high priest. Another acolyte came forward and cracked down the skull, exposing Adam's brain, which was soon cooked. We were all required to consume a piece to prove our allegiance. The ceremony had finally come to an end. The high priest told me that it was my duty to dismember and dispose of the body, to which I happily obliged. I couldn't help but chuckle as I realized I was making Adam's ends meet. I did this nearly 60 more times before Horatio and Gelino were caught. The cult disbanded quickly, and we all moved into the dark. I finally went to college with the money I had made, and now I'm a physical therapist in a new city. I never was a big fan of spring break, other than having the days away from school. Getting drunk on the beach for an entire week seemed more like a task than a pleasure. But there was a girl on the trip named Jennifer that I had been talking to recently. So I packed up my car and headed down to the beach that afternoon. Logic meet libido. I pulled into the parking lot of the hotel around dusk, and I could already hear my friend screaming at me from the 7th-story balcony. Despite being a pretty reserved person, it was hard to deny the infectious happiness of a drunk friend. One of my friends decided to throw a lime down to me that I refused to catch. It hit the ground and exploded onto the shell-paved sidewalk, splattering a green puree on a nearby elderly couple. They were not pleased, to say the least. They got up from their bench and marched away fuming. My friend yelled a drunken apology, and I walked away acting like I had no clue who he was. I went straight up to the hotel room because I knew that the party had already started. Upon entering, I felt more like I was in a liquor store or a frat house than in a hotel room. There were 4 games of beer pong going on between the 3 rooms of my friends, handles of booze in every available corner and tabletop, and an illogical number of solo cups. People were already doing shots, and on the other side of the room I glimpsed Jennifer funneling a beer. I maneuvered through the war zone of drunk people and made my way over to her to try to start a conversation. But as soon as I got there, she stepped out onto the balcony without seeing me. I decided it would be best for me to unpack and come out with drinks so I could look like a hero, which I did. As the night went on, it was pretty obvious that some people had started a bit too early, and they were passing out left and right. At around 1 a.m. there were still about 7 or 8 of us awake, so we all decided to play beer pong. To my surprise, Jennifer came right up to me and asked if I wanted to be her partner. I was awestruck. The combination of surprise and alcohol left me speechless to the point where everyone in the room thought I was ignoring her. There was a short silence before my friend Eric harshly asked what the problem was. I replied, "Nothing, just drunk. Sorry, let's play." Jennifer giggled a little bit and agreed that we should start playing. At first, everything seemed normal, until I started noticing that everyone was staring at me in a strange way, almost as if I had done something to piss them off. Something about that awkward pause a few minutes earlier changed the entire mood of that room. I thought my honest explanation was enough to banish any doubts, but eventually it became clear that everyone thought I was just being an asshole. After everyone had their fill of beer, a few people sat down to watch a movie, but Jennifer and I went out onto the balcony to talk some more. I apologized again for the awkward pause earlier, and she laughed it off, saying it was no big deal. Somehow that was still not enough to comfort me. I would periodically gaze back into the hotel room where my friends were sitting, and I could see Eric and his fraternity brother, Tyler, glaring at me through the window. I asked Jennifer if she thought they were pissed at me, and she replied, "Nah, they're probably just drunk. Speaking of, could you pass me that drink behind you?" She propped herself up on the balcony rails and pointed at a bottle that was hers. As I turned around to grab the bottle with my free hand, I heard the unmistakable sound of skin quickly rubbing against metal, like the squeaking noise your hands make when sliding down a fire pole. I turned around just in time to see Jennifer's body begin to tilt backward over the railing. She shrieked, and I attempted to grab her, but I hadn't let go of the beer bottles. My knuckles simply slapped against her feet as they flipped over the edge. When her body hit, the crunch was sickening. It wasn't just any regular crunch. It was multiple crunches, so close in succession that it sounded like someone was tearing a sheet of paper. Blood splattered across the hoods of nearby cars. Once again, the calm silence of the night returned. I slowly crept towards the balcony railing and looked down and saw Jennifer's body lightly illuminated by the yellow sidewalk lights. Her body, once covered in a soft tan, was now drenched in a bright red. Her legs and torso were skewered by her own bones, her head twisted in the direction of the bench where the elderly couple once sat. 7 stories up, I was alive and numb, a sensation that I was quickly ripped away from. Within a fraction of a second, I felt a set of arms grab me from behind, violently pull me back through the door and onto the hotel room floor. At first, I thought I was being pulled back in so I didn't have to see the carnage below. That was, until I saw the look on Eric's face. I knew within a moment what he was thinking, what they were all thinking. They started to yell, "The hell is wrong with you, freak? Why did you push her?" I vehemently argued for my innocence, but they weren't buying my story. Tyler and his girlfriend swore that they saw me push her. It was then that I realized that they mistook my lunge to grab her as me pushing her. Once again, I was at the same loss for words that landed me in this situation. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. None of them were there on the balcony to hear her last words that would have proven my innocence. All they saw was one dumb interaction coupled with her fall, but that's all they needed to make up their minds. I needed a moment to myself, so I tried to walk out of the room, but I was immediately thrown to the ground. They told me I wasn't going anywhere until the police got there, which eventually they did. It was just like a few minutes before. I had nothing to prove my innocence, and I had 6 witnesses saying that I had been hostile towards Jennifer just prior to her death. I had nothing. It was over. They cuffed me and took me away. I spent the next few days with lawyers and in jail cells, while the hotel employees spent the next few weeks washing Jennifer's flesh from the concaves of the shell-paved walk. The judge put me away for years, so long that I couldn't even remember my own phone number. But it still wasn't long enough for me to forget the image of Jennifer's mangled body. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you email it to urmaker6260@gmail.com. So I know this video was a little bit different. In fact, I actually had a writer go ahead and write this, as you could probably tell by the intro to the video. Both of these stories were inspired by true events, and you could probably actually look up a few articles that are very similar to this if you wanted to spend the time. I figured this might be a nice little twist, and it still keeps in the line with the true part, because stuff like this actually, crazily, does happen. So for those of you getting ready for spring break, or already on it, make sure you stay safe. You never know what people are waiting to do, or when accidents will strike. I appreciate everyone watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's inspired by real events. What, cat? Go away. Go. I'm recording. Go. Dude. Hey. Thumper. Go. Leave me alone. Dude, I'm recording. Stop it, cat. Dude, I don't want to be in here all day. Get off me. You're soft, I know. Okay, go lay down. Go to sleep or something. Lay down. You can lay right there, dude. Here, I'll pet you after. You're killing me, Holmes. Shut up. Go. Go. Get out. Go play with Tigger or something. Where was I?